Hi, welcome to Cloud Cover. I'm Steve Marks.
And I'm Wade Wegner.
We have a fantastic show about various sort of diagnostics, debugging,
logging
thingies.
Yep.
So that'll be fun, and of course, we're gonna have a tip that actually calls back a little bit to analytics stuff that we were talking about a couple weeks ago. But before that, of course, we got a bunch of news. We don't really have a bunch of news. That was a lie. That was the first lie of the show, was that we have a bunch of news. We have a little bit of news.
We have some news.
This news is actually significant. We should probably really explain what this means, because people have had trouble understanding this, I think.
Do you want to just read the post? Or?
Yeah, let's just. Beginning October 1st, 2011, we will make 2 billion related updates. But nobody cares about that, because the bottom line is extra small instances are getting cheaper by 20%, which, by the way, means they used to be 5 cents and they're going to be 4 cents. I imagine it's written this way because not everybody pays in US dollars, and so the pricing is actually, it's 20% across the board. For those of us who do pay in US dollars, that means it's 4 cents instead of 5 cents. The other thing we did about sort of extra small and other sort of compute, instance sizes, is we made everything a lot simpler in terms of swapping different sizes.
Yes.
And so we used to have these weird things like this table shows, where if you had the introductory special, you had a certain number of extra small hours, a certain number of small hours, and you couldn't sort of swap them. You'd have to, once you used up 750 of this, you'd have to change sizes and use the other ones. Where it was basically they weren't swappable. You couldn't change from one to the other. It was kind of confusing. It's also kind of a pain. Now life is much easier. Everything's going to be just sort of labeled in terms of small, but you can use any size. You can go up or down, and it's all just sort of a multiplicative thing.
So there's a ratio between a small and an extra small.
Right. So extra small, you get 3 to 1.
3 times. Yep.
So if you have 750 small hours, that means you have 2,250 extra small hours, or you have 375 medium hours, or 187.5 large hours, or
I think we get
96. Okay. Anyway, the point is,
get the point.
They just multiply by sort of the ratios that you got there. That made things much clearer, right?
I think so, yeah.
Saying a bunch of numbers, I think, help people. But the bottom line is everything now that you're going to see starting August 1st, no, starting October 1st.
October 1st.
Starting October 1st, you're going to see everything in terms of small instance hours. But don't worry about that, because you can use all the sizes, and you get sort of the appropriate allotment. So everything just sort of works out. You also end up, I believe, getting more stuff in pretty much all of these. If you look at like the extra small equivalent, whatever, it's higher than it used to be. So you're getting a fairly good deal on all this stuff. There's one other change in here, which is to simplify the billing zones for bandwidth. And so the deal is basically I'll just describe the new world because it's simple. The new world is there's Zone 1 and there's Zone 2. Zone 1 means Europe and North America. Zone 2 means the whole rest of the world. And bandwidth across the CDN, or just storage or compute, or actually SQL Azure, or service bus, or whatever. All the bandwidth things just fall into those 2 zones, and they just have prices associated with those 2 things. So it's much easier to figure out what is going to cost what. Before, CDN used to actually be a slightly different rate than storage and whatever. So now it's all getting a lot simpler. So that's also good news.
And it's probably worth pointing out that I think one of the reasons you're so able to effectively explain the cost and pricing aspects of this is you've actually taken a new role, right? That
is right. I'm now in charge of the explaining pricing blog posts. No, I've gone to the dark side, and I am now a marketing guy on Windows Azure. I'm a technical product manager as of like a couple days ago or something.
Nice.
Basically writing blog posts, creating demos, and so
is it pretty similar to what you've been doing?
It may look like really I didn't change jobs at all, but technically I'm in sort of a different part of the organization and whatever, and so it's a slight shift. So now I'm much better at interpreting blog posts.
The more important thing is, does your title change?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm a technical product manager. I used to be a tactical strategist.
Dang. So are there any tactical strategists now in Microsoft?
I hope not. I gotta be honest. If there are, we should have whoever that is on the show to explain what a tactical strategist is.
Cool.
Yes.
All
So
right.
thanks, Wade, for that.
Let's move on.
What else? I wrote a blog post.
Nice.
So that's good news. We should cover that. Doesn't happen that often. I actually wrote a roundup. This is because someone asked on the MSDN forums, hey, it was actually a guy who was doing development on Linux, and he wanted to talk to Windows Azure Storage. And so he was asking what languages, is there something in, like, Python was his preferred language, but are there libraries in any of these languages that I can use?
Yep.
And so I ended up writing a whole blog post to basically respond to this
Well,
guy.
you actually wrote all the libraries first last night, right?
Yeah, first I wrote some libraries. No, I basically wrote a roundup of it's actually 9 different programming languages of ones that I'm aware of that I've sort of personally seen that do Windows Azure Storage stuff. I did actually write some. I mean, I've written the majority of the code for the Python library. I've contributed to the Ruby one. I wrote the Perl one.
Slide down a little.
What's it?
Oh, so we should put iOS in there as well.
Oh, we need.
So we got the
iOS on
Objective-C, yeah, and then also there's a native library for Windows Phone as well. So
for Windows 7.
So you
for
forgot the
Windows
2
Phone.
that I've worked on, Steve.
Yeah, I did forget about
All right.
those.
Well,
but anyway, we can add.
so there's
to the
11
list.
then, right?
So we can add to the list. I mean, I put Erlang and Common Lisp on there, but I left out like iOS, Objective-C. So yeah, we'll add to the list. But see, there's a little thing here that's like, hey, do you know of any libraries not on my list? Send me some email.
I'll send you an email.
So
I got to figure out what your email is first, but
and then it's on the side of my blog. So
okay, good.
It says it right here.
Nice.
So anyway, so that's kind of cool. So if you're looking, I don't think a lot of people are aware that there are actually this many libraries. People know there's a .NET library, obviously, because we ship it. Although I also mentioned another bunch of code written by David Paulman that's basically like a re-implementation of that, but sort of directly against the REST stuff. It's very instructional if you want to kind of see how all the requests are put together. Where his code is actually is really readable as that.
Good.
So everybody knew there was that. A lot of people knew there was a PHP library and a Java library because we talk about those ones a lot. I bet almost no one knew there was a Common Lisp library. I bet few people knew there was Python and Ruby and even JavaScript and whatever. So cool.
Excellent.
Check that out if you're looking for those things. I got links on here to all those different projects, and I'll keep adding them.
Yep.
Next up, Nate.
Mr. Totten.
We cannot stop talking about Nate on this show.
Yep. So he's shipped an update to the WebRoll accelerator. So you guys covered it about 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago.
Something like that.
The WebRoll accelerator, basically, it's designed to make it easier for you to ship. Oh yeah, Nate Totten.
Nate Totten. This
Writer, actor, Kansan,
Kansan.
and Man of the Wind.
Yep. This is where I went when I was looking for Nate's blog today, and I forgot that he's ntotten.com. I typed in natetotten.com and got here.
Interesting.
Okay,
All right.
sorry for that
No.
distraction.
That was
back
useful.
to the
That was
real,
helpful.
the real Nate Totten.
But the WebRoll
who's not a
accelerator,
Kansan.
designed to make it easier for you to deploy your applications into Windows Azure. So you use web deploy, can ship your web deploy package up to Windows Azure. It'll put it on Windows Azure Storage and then synchronize it across all your running instances. Useful tool. So this update, it has 5 different updates. So one of the things, though, there were some bugs reported in the first one, so a lot of those have been fixed. In particular, there was one there was a problem where if you had a really large web deploy package and synchronization was turned on, it would start to synchronize before the entire package had been deployed, which caused some issues. So one of the big updates you'll see on number 2 is the ability to stop the synchronization so that you can then do a web deploy, get the entire package up there, and then turn synchronization back on. A lot more logging and monitoring. We actually added a lot of this stuff so we could help figure out what these bugs were. So I think, and the net result is there's some better stuff for you to leverage. Also, Nate had built some helpers for the CDN, and a lot of that stuff was incorporated into the WebRoll accelerator to attach to that, and some other stuff as well. So it's a good update. So you can get it up on Codeplex. It was released earlier this week.
All right. Enough of that news stuff.
Yeah, let's move to the feature.
Let's talk about some actual stuff. So we were talking last week about what we should cover. Was it last week or is probably like Sunday?
It was over the
that
weekend.
It was over the weekend about what we should do for this week. That's how we prepare for these things.
Yep.
And we were talking about actually. So I think I suggested it because last week, like 3 different times, I got an email from a customer or was helping somebody on Stack Overflow or something, and boiled down to the way we solved the problem was we did like the dumbest possible logging solution that I've ever thought of, that I blogged about last year actually in a blog post called Printf Here in the Cloud, which it's amazing. I don't have any sort of, I should really keep some statistics on page views or something, because I bet this is like sort of the most, like my most referenced blog post, except maybe the continuation token thing, which is also sort of famous.
I use this technique. I mean, I've copied your code, and I mean, it's effective.
I do this like all the time. I write like this line of code, or if I'm ambitious and want unique file names for if I want to track more than one error,
you'll grab that
I write this code instead. But basically, this is in your application. Just put a big try catch around whatever it is you're trying to capture, and then spit out the text of the thing to a blob. And the reason why this is really popular and works is because it's so easy to add, because it's just like a couple lines of code, and then it dumps stuff immediately to blob storage. So this is as opposed to Windows Azure Diagnostics, which is your go-to thing for if you actually need sort of robust logging and monitoring stuff in Windows Azure. That does really smart stuff like batch everything locally and then send like a batch of requests to storage, so it sort of saves on bandwidth and transaction costs. It's configurable. You can do like an on-demand transfer, or you can configure things to automatically go to storage every once in a while. So it's really cool and robust, but there's at least a minute delay. The fastest that the sort of interval that it'll copy to storage is 1 minute, which if you have like the kind of application I deploy all the time that just sort of boots and then fails and starts up again and whatever, you might actually not give diagnostics a chance to do the copying. It probably should eventually, but you've sort of got, it's much nicer to have sort of like a synchronous, you know, just write it right now sort of thing. It's not the best performance for your production thing, but it works. So printf has been a really popular way to do this stuff. But the main drawback to this is that it writes everything to like a different blob. So you end up with
a lot. Like
I have a bunch of apps where I have a folder full of especially things that happen periodically. So you'll have a bunch of errors, and I just have a bunch of blobs in some container. And you can't tell which one you really want to look at, and so it's kind of a pain. So what I thought was it would be nice to show how to do a similar sort of thing, but with table storage, so that you can actually just query them all at once and see that. So what I did, which I have a blog post here, but we can kind of pull up the code and show it, is write a little trace listener that goes straight to table storage. And so you just kind of turn it on in your web config or app config. And everything goes into table storage. And so let's first go to tabletrace.cloudapp.net and try it out. So I'm going to put some message with some category and hit send. And what this does, the implementation of, no, I don't have it there. All right, we're just going to pull up let's pull up the code for that whole app, because why not? What that does, so when I click that button, it runs this thing. It does logit, which is just calling trace.write.
Yep.
So that's all that it does, right? And so, but because I have this trace listener turned on, it means that in table storage, I often just go to one of my favorite tools, the Clumsy Leaf tools. So this is Clumsy Leaf Table Explorer. You'll see there's a message here that says some message. And the nice thing is they'll all show up here in tables, so I can just go to look at them all together. And because they're in table storage, I can also do querying and things. So I actually built a little UI here too, very fancy, that just looks inside table storage and lists them all in sort of sorted order. It says what instance it was and the category and the log message. So this is kind of handy. So if you slap this code in, and I've got the full code for the trace listener itself, as well as in the blog post I have, this is the entire code for sort of viewing those logs. It's just a little one query and then just sort of spin them out into list items. So it's a little heavier than just writing try catch and then logging something. But
not by
you
much,
just have to include this DLL, reference it, and then a line of config that sort of turns it on, and then you'll get everything to table storage. It's a kind of nice thing. That's the idea. The whole code is in this blog post, and there's also a link to download just the DLL or the full source code, and you can try that out.
Yeah. And this morning, Mr. Dunn, remember Ryan?
I was so proud of myself, okay? I wrote all this code last night.
Yeah.
I got everything working, wrote up this blog post, tweeted about it. And then Ryan Dunn, former co-host of the Cloud Cover show and forever a member of Team Cloud Cover, tweeted back and goes, yeah, you know, there's like a hands-on lab in the training kit that already does exactly that.
Yeah.
And it's better. Like he had to sort of add on, it also has like an on-off, it does something that this code doesn't do, which I think is actually a really good idea, which is to have a configuration setting to turn it on and off. Which means you don't have to redeploy to, you can just, you just flip it off and flip it back on.
In fact, so here's
so here it is. If you go to the, we'll put a link in the notes directly to
Windows
this,
Azure Platform Training Course on MSDN.
If you go to the training course and look in the debugging, I think it's just called sort of debugging, something about, what's the actual exercise? It'll say it up here, right?
Debugging
an application in the cloud. As you go through that, now I lost the actual place where,
there it is.
But here's the part where you actually do that. But as you go through that, one of the things that it does is add tracing support with a trace listener that is built that goes straight to table storage that looks pretty much exactly like what I put on my blog. And so you can always go look there, and of course there are code samples for all this stuff. So if you download this lab, you'll get the code for all of this.
Well, you'll get to walk through the hands-on lab as well, which helps to reinforce how it works. So. And
it has the Visual Basic version.
And VB, yep.
See, none of my code has the VB version, so you get that too. So so that's cool.
Excellent.
So we're
going to take it one step further, right?
Yeah, let's all right, good. We got just like writing a message, but what if we really want to like handle like exceptions that actually happen in a web app and log those and do something fancy? And for that, we're going to kick things over to Wade right after this.
Such an instrument is the turbo encabulator. Now, basically, the only new principle involved is that instead of power being generated by the relative motion of conductors and fluxes, it is produced by the modal interaction of magnetoreluctance and capacitive directance. The original machine had a base plate of prefamulated amulite surmounted by a malleable logarithmic casing in such a way that the two spurving bearings were in a direct line with a panametric fam. The latter consisted simply of 6 hydrocoptic Marsal vanes so fitted to the ambifacient lunar wane shaft that side fumbling was effectively prevented.
All right. So we're gonna look at ELMAH. So you most likely, I'm guessing most people are familiar with ELMAH. It's error logging modules and handlers tool that allows you to collect all this information. So what we wanted to do is show an approach to using ELMAH within your Windows Azure application to kind of take it to the next step. Collect all this information, make it nice and presentable. But we also want to, essentially what we want to do is adapt it so that all this information gets captured into Windows Azure storage, specifically in tables.
So, because that's the thing. I mean, ELMAH just works in Windows Azure because it's just code, and you just sort of put it into your app and it works. But it does need a place to store the logs that's going to persist, that's going to be shared across the instances.
And there's a lot of advantages to using Windows Azure table storage here. So, we'll show that. So. First off, let's just do a quick demo of what it looks like so that people that haven't used ELMAH can get a sense for it.
Your demo looks nicer than mine already, I've noticed.
I just used the
because you have the template. I always start with the empty, and then I just like...
I modified the template a little bit. But,
you did?
Essentially, though, if you go... I'll keep this up and running for a while, elmahdemo.cloudapp.net. Essentially, I'm just going to throw an exception. And so throw this exception.
So I'm imagining the code behind this button press is throw new exception.
Yeah, exactly.
With the text,
I'll show you the code in a second. Yeah, very, very simple. And so it throws an exception, and then if you click this tab here, it's going to end up going to the handler. And the handler, you can see, does a nice job of presenting all of this. One of the things that's nice too is you even have an RSS feed so that you can get an update, you subscribe to the errors. I mean, there's a lot of nice things about ELMAH.
Yep.
And you can see here, we've got an exception. And here's throw this exception. You can select the details, and I mean, it shows you a lot of nice information about it. Gives you all the server variables associated with it. Just it's a good tool.
This is one of the reasons ELMAH is awesome, because you can put some custom error, you can put some friendly error message and never show anybody the exception.
Yep, but
it'll still log like what the original.
Yep.
In fact, if you click original ASP.NET error page, you can get the exact yellow screen of death that you would have gotten.
Yeah.
Which means you can feel free to make pretty custom error pages, which you should do. And then ELMAH does. ELMAH's a fantastic app. That's why so many people so many people use it.
I actually didn't. I was reading this today. You can also just, I think, go test like that, and it'll throw an exception, a safe exception. And so now when you come back here and let's refresh, you'll see that it just logs it a little bit differently. So it gives you a nice way to test the exception
make sure
as well
working
without having an actual exception
about
thrown. So yeah, so you can just use that as a quick way to test it if you don't want to throw, explicitly throw an exception in your code. So that's nice. So essentially what we've got here is everything's up and running. Let me show you here now in Table Explorer. I've got my ELMAH storage account, and then I've got a table here, ELMAH errors. And if I do a refresh, you'll see here that essentially we're just taking that information and serializing it and storing it within table storage. And it's just using this then to surface it up through the handler.
And notice this schema. This is sort of the dumbest schema that can work.
Yeah.
I've seen other people do ELMAH table providers and do something sort of different where they actually try to extract some of the information from the exception and put it there so that maybe it can be more easily queried. But the way that ELMAH actually uses the data is it just doesn't care. All it needs is the list.
Yep.
And so it's I think fine to do just this, which is just put the serialized error in XML. That's really sort of what ELMAH expects to get back from the provider anyway.
So in terms of what I did to get this running, it's really pretty straightforward. I just created a new Windows Azure project, and then I used NuGet, and I grabbed the ELMAH NuGet package. So I'll just show you this here real quick. Installed package, so you see I've got ELMAH, and then it grabbed the ELMAH core as part of it. And that gave me the assembly, it updated my web.config file, it created the handler. I mean, it did most everything for me. The next step is to then specifically create the entities that we want to use within table storage. So I've got a error entity class here. Very simple stuff. So I've got a table service entity. This is basically describing what you just talked through, like what are the different components in it. And then you essentially create a table error log using the error log from ELMAH. And get everything set up. So you can see here we're implementing get error, and we're returning it from table storage. Get errors. Here's log. Here's a dictionary for config. I mean, you're essentially just creating an just an implementation of these different methods required by ELMAH, and everything works great.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, the main overrides here are log and
I think
get errors.
Get error, get errors, and log.
Right, and so log is what inserts things, right? And then the other ones are just queries.
Yep.
And actually, so I mean, it's not a lot of code to implement one of these things.
No. And we were talking if we had a little bit more time, what I'd like to do is create a Windows Azure specific NuGet that chains from the other NuGets so that and it just includes this and everything's done. And other than that, then the only other thing to update is we added this section here in the web.config. Let's talk about the second one here first. So basically error log, that allows us to point to the table error log within the application. So specifically gives us an opportunity to create or to wire in what all the overrides that we just implemented. So that basically is there. Also, we put the connection string for tables in there as well. So if you remember, there was a connection string. There we go. So the connection string is used within log, get errors, get error, etc., and it just grabs that from config. Then also, if you deploy this to Windows Azure and you want to be able to load the handler, the actual elmah.axd file, you want to put allow remote access yes. If you don't do this and you try to go to the handler, you won't get anything.
Just get a 403. Yeah.
What we were talking about may not be a bad thing. The fact that when you deploy, you probably in a production site don't want that to be publicly accessible.
Right.
And given the fact that we're serializing all this information into table storage means we could put that handler somewhere local if we wanted to, or really anywhere, and just point it to the ELMAH errors table.
Right. You can create a totally different web app and just put that config as long as you use the same connection string. You'd see the same list of errors and whatever. It's probably a good idea, and of course you can always, if you're on the VM that allow remote access, even if you say no, then if it's local access, you can still get to that thing.
You can
and so you can always remote in and go to it. But lots of options. The nice thing, the sort of uniquely nice thing about using some sort of cloud storage thing is that you can access it from other places.
Yep.
And whatever. So it's different than what people normally have with ELMAH,
but
it's
I mean,
cool.
it's actually surprisingly simple to get this set up. I mean, and it's a very effective.
It's very useful. The data that you get back
use.
from ELMAH, so much more useful than the stuff that you would think to log yourself, because it's got
like if you
all
used
the
your
server
printf.
variables and where. Right.
Yeah.
The printf thing, you'd get a stack trace, but then you wouldn't get like, well, what was the URL that was being reached? What are all the headers? What's the the IS stuff? If you scroll down here, it's got all of the data from IS about the the headers and other sort of server variables, and whatever. And you wouldn't have any of that and whatever. And so it's very nice to just drop ELMAH in there.
Yeah.
So it's cool. So don't use any of that stuff we talked about before. Just put ELMAH in. Actually, for a web app, if you're doing an ASP.NET web app, I do think if you put in ELMAH, it's going to cover sort of all that stuff and make your life easier. The reason to maybe use some of these other things is, first of all, if you're tracing things that aren't errors, but just stuff that you want to track, ELMAH's kind of the wrong thing for that. It sort of handles the actual errors in the app. And second, if you're doing a worker role, or if you're in like webrole.cs or some of that other code, particularly on start and those places where it's kind of hard to track those things when things go wrong, that's where it might make sense to use something like the printf or a table.
Actually, using
traces.
your table traces would be nice. You could even set it up so that it's storing it in the same place.
Yeah.
So cool, excellent,
very awesome.
All right, so I think it's that time.
It is that time. It is the time for the introduction to the tip of the week.
Yep, best part of the show.
I don't have any ideas for. We're getting lazy. We're just putting it all on Bob lately. We've just sort of.
Yeah. But he does come up with
We
good
used to
stuff,
have
so.
specific. We used to ask for things that were, and now it's just kind of Bob have fun. So I don't know. Let's leave it at Bob have fun.
So here's your tip of the week.
Tip of the week.
It's new. It's now. It's Flash Cube.
And we're back. We've got a tip of the week that this is. Remember when? I made a mistake, but nobody knew. But now I'm gonna confess. But a couple weeks ago, when we talked about the new analytics and metric stuff in storage and Windows
and we
Azure
did
storage.
preface that it was pretty new to us. So
Yes,
you've got
it was
an excuse.
quite new to us. But there was this point where you said, "Hey, Steve, you've had this turned on for a while now. Are there any logs in the folder?"
Yep.
And I pulled up my favorite tool, Clumsy Leaf Cloud Explorer, and said, "Nope, there's no
nothing
container
there
called
yet."
$logs, so there's nothing there yet."
Yep.
That was a mistake because
The logs were there,
That
right?
container won't actually show up. Like if you call the list containers API in blob storage, you will not see the $logs container. It's sort of hidden. It's kind of special and whatever. And so to get to it, you actually have to go do like a list blobs within the $logs container, and then you'll see that it's all there. And I suspect at the time, I think it had been long enough. I suspect at the time we recorded the show there were actually logs, but I didn't know how to see them.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Clumsy Leaf has changed their tool, Cloud Explorer, so now it works the way that I would have liked it to work 2 weeks ago, which is it automatically sniffs out that $logs container and shows it if it's there. And so now if I repeat that experiment and I go open up Smark's test where I have it turned on, there's $logs. That's pretty small. Let's zoom in. But anyway, there's $logs just shows up at the top of the list. And that's because Clumsy Leaf is doing. Now, to be clear, like if you just list containers, you won't see this. So, in fact, probably all the other tools, it's still very new. I suspect that none of the other tools actually will show you this container yet. So don't just expect to see it everywhere. But Clumsy Leaf did a special case kind of thing to just make sure that the logs thing shows up. And so you can actually go into there. And it's got logs for blobs and tables because I turned those on. And sort of drill down to some time on some day and open up one of these files. And here's what they look like. It's, I don't know, somebody accessed something. You know what this is? This is from my About Me.
Bird?
This is some, yeah, I don't know.
Thumbnails bird?
Aboutme.cloudapp.net. Let's find out what it is. Oh, wow, that's kind of big. So one of these is apparently called Bird.
Interesting.
Can we find out who it is? Because somebody actually accessed it like today. You know what? I can just type it in, can't I? I can just change bird. There you go.
All right.
Congratulations,
Nikita.
Nikita Berdnikov. I'm gonna guess from Russia or thereabout.
All right.
Congratulations on making it onto Cloud Cover by virtue of being the last guy to use this app. So anyway, so the tip really is go if you're using Cloud Explorer, or if you're not, but you want an easy way to go get the $logs thing, then maybe this is a good time to do it. But just go to clumsyleaf.com/product/Cloud Explorer. If you land there, it can kind of be tricky to. You'll first land here, which talks about Azure Explorer, which is a Visual Studio plugin that does all this stuff. Very cool, a great product. But I go up to products and go over here to Cloud Explorer, which is just for blob storage, and that's the tool that I'm using. I also use Table Explorer, which is over here. Note that Table Explorer has not yet been updated to do the metrics tables.
I'm sure they're working on it right now.
So it won't show that. But I'd be sort of surprised since they just did it for the $logs thing. I kind of expect the Table Explorer will have an update too, and we'll show you all the metrics things in there. And so,
but it's easy. Just download the new package, the new zip file.
Yep.
Install it. And
it works. Yeah, it's nice.
Very easy.
The install is very lightweight in Cloud Explorer, so it's quick to do. Just go do it, and then you can take a look at your logs and embarrass people on your own weekly show. So I think that's going to do it.
Yeah. Great.
So,
Good show.
as usual, if you got feedback, anything you want to send us, just tweet to @CloudCoverShow, and we will reply sarcastically. And,
if you do the reply.
If I do the reply. You can always tell, like, if you get a reply from @CloudCoverShow from that account, you never know, like, did Wade send that, or did Steve send it, or does Ryan still have the credentials for that account, which is quite possible. But if it's a sarcastic reply, well, it could be Ryan also.
It could be Ryan, yeah.
But if it's a straightforward, legitimate, helpful reply, it's probably Wade. Okay, with that, we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.